What's up? This is Dan Fradenburgh for FIGGERRIDOUT.com. I'm part human and from the internet. But today I'm with Eli Ku. And Eli, I'd like to introduce you to the person in the camera here. The person in the camera, and that's you, probably asked me something about leaving Taiwan in 2017, and you're watching this because I said that Eli is the person you need to hear from.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right, right, exactly. But thanks for being here today, Eli. Can you introduce yourself a little bit before I color in what we're up to today?
All right. Yeah. My name is Eli. I'm from Hawaii. I was born in Hawaii, live in Colorado now, and I was in prior military, and now I'm an entrepreneur, and and an investor on the real estate side.
Yep.
I do multifamily investings, and I run a trucking company. I'm a father of three and a husband of one.
Yeah, that's the way to have it. Yeah, it's a much better way of doing it. But just so you know, figureidout.com, it's quite a hodgepodge of different things. But usually when I interview somebody, it's a dream job position, and the recurring theme is I ask the person who's achieved something really, really significant. I ask, how can somebody end up where you are if they have no friends, no family, and no cash? And sometimes I waver from that a little bit. Like when I interviewed Brian Cuban, his big achievement was he's 15 years sober, which is definitely something that qualifies you as somebody that is worth admiration, and finding out how exactly they did it. But Eli, here you got two different things that we wanted to discuss that are in there. So let's start off with the first one, which is frame it in around 2017. What are you able to share with the audience as far as what you were up to?
I was in the military. I was in Korea, so I can fill that in. And I was part of one of the biggest projects there. And yeah, the it was a very scary time at that time. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
and what I can fill into is that it was a mission that was to protect the whole South Korea peninsula. And during a time of the election, I don't know how important people knows their history about 1950, the Korean War. It was during an election too. So
Hmm. Hmm.
uh, we what I can fill in is the I was part of a huge project to protect the peninsula with artillery defense system.
Hmm.
Uh, you can actually look it on YouTube. It's called FAD. So I was there to do the boots on ground and did a lot of groundwork down there. I was in the NCOIC of the nightly missions through the day missions, 24-hour option operations. Yeah, I was boots on ground there.
Right, right, exactly. And now I already mentioned that the people in the audience that more likely than not, I was talking about why I moved to Canada, which was not something that I actually really wanted to do. I thought that I was going to grow old and die in Taiwan, and where I wouldn't have to be this cold as I am right now. But it's funny because in 2016, I flew to Canada to get my last worldly possessions that were in this country and shipped them to Taiwan because I was treating it as completely permanent. But after the election in 2016, what happened was I'd say it was like late spring, early summer of 2017. Kim Jong Un started lobbing missiles into the Sea of Japan, and Syria was more or less going on at that time, and you saw on the news, awful images of children who ended up being the victims of that conflict, and I just simply was not willing to let that happen. And politically, China does not consider Taiwan to be a country, even though Taiwan issues their own passports, they use their own money, they create their own laws. They do not respect laws that are created in China. People from China need to get a visa from the Taiwanese government in order to visit Taiwan, and that's completely separate from the restrictions they have in China, as far as like if you want to go from living in Shanghai, which is Shanghai for, like the way English speakers usually say it. If you want to move from like Shanghai to Beijing or Hong Kong or Shenzhen or some place like that, you have to get permission, but that's all within the Chinese government. So it's completely separate, and like also like Taiwanese people can be denied visas for going to China for no reason whatsoever. Whereas if you're from Hawaii and you're American, so that means like if you go into the mainland, they can't stop you. They can't say no, you're not allowed because you're a citizen. That's what being a citizen means. So that's basically where that's coming from. And of course, that did not turn into a giant conflict. But maybe you can tell us a little bit as far as your recollection goes, as far as like Seoul, Korea, like what sort of population are we talking about, and what sort of existential threats they have from a military perspective from the north potentially.
I would say the biggest thing was that at any moment they could cross the border and shoot calculated missiles into the Seoul, the central location of Korea. Uh, and the biggest part about all the defensive maneuvers that were done, we pushed everybody south, just because of the imminent danger that he was causing. Another thing that people don't realize too, that it's very true. It's not as publicized as much as possible, but it's very true that someone like him, that has control over such possible weapons, he could literally shoot it at any moment, at any time. But it's our job to protect ourselves at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, and to protect the people we are aligned with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all that I was in charge of. But talking about that Taiwan thing, part of the Busan mission down south for the THAAD missiles was the maneuverability so that China could not uh, really attack Taiwan at the same time, because at one point they wanted to take over Taiwan because of the resources that they have. If
Mm-hmm.
you look at a lot of the kids' toys nowadays, even some of the computer chips nowadays are made in Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
So they're a big exporting country out there. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's another key reason why we set up shop in Peninsula.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And if you like, you're younger than I am. So when I was a kid in the 80s, the saying was made in Taiwan. It wasn't made in China. It's and I've also heard that Taiwanese people, they employ more Chinese people than there are Taiwanese people. It's something to the tune. So Taiwan has 23, 25 million people, somewhere in that neck of the woods, and they employ about 100 million Chinese people in China. And going back and forth to work is super duper common. I met lots of people who run factories or something like that in China. And I guess the other thing that I'd want to add would be like if you see some guy named Dan Fradenburgh on the internet who says that
Yep.
Taiwan is an independent country, regardless of what China says, then you have to say, well, why does China say that it is part of China? And the short version is that when America beat Japan in 1945 as part of World War II, Japan had to relinquish control of Taiwan. And I was actually even in the building where that document was signed a great number of times. And the thing that Taiwanese political scientists emphasize is that when they wrote that, the Japanese didn't say to whom they relinquished control to. So they didn't say it goes to the Kuomintang, right? Which is the Chiang Kai-shek's regime that ended up becoming the political system inside Taiwan, and they didn't say it's to the People's Republic of China and Mao Zedong's side. So that's why there is a claim there, but it's like in fact, like if they don't follow laws, they don't give taxes or anything like that, then it's not like it doesn't make any sense to claim it other than it seems like the defensive purposes of being able to stop embargoes is what's most appealing to China as far as why they want it. So, so like as far as scale, like you mentioned a few numbers as far as like how much money we're talking about this installation that you were doing. So before we move on to our next little point of what makes you special, can you say anything about that as far as like what sort of order of magnitude we're talking that you were?
Oh yeah, it was a $98 million project that was inflated in for one place, and there were multiple places that ended up going across from north to south of the southern peninsula of South Korea. So I'm talking about maybe 6 installations of defense systems, just protecting that peninsula and overall. And just to let people know, it was a huge project. We had to keep it under wraps for a long period of time, but it came public when the Korean news infiltrated somehow on our what we were doing, and they made it public. I think it was a good way to show that we had camaraderie, and we were working together as allies rather than as enemies. A lot of people also their culture didn't want us there. But even though we were there for good reasons, as far as just protecting, we gave back a lot of their land too. They thought that we were taking over, but we gave them back the Seoul. So you know where Seoul is? That's the capital. There's a nice little installation in Seoul called Pyeongtaek, and we gave it back to them. By the time I was there, they shoved all the American soldiers in America down south, and they gave them back all their land pretty much, which was kind of a little frustrating on my end because there was a bunch of people where I was living all of a sudden because they were shoving a lot of our militant personnel down there, and even contractors, DoD contractors, were being moved down south just because of a show, I guess you would say, hospitality towards the main host country, which was South Korea.
Yeah.
But yeah, that projects were huge.
Right.
And as far as I would say, they were one of the most, I guess, top priority for saving during that time. And it was only just because of the presidential reelection. And Trump, I guess, wanted to show force, that he wasn't playing around and protecting our nation. Yeah, he mobilized an entire armor brigade to go there. So
wow, yeah, that's really something. And one thing I'm really glad about, and it's because I'll call it that I'm a Buddhist, right? Which is that I don't think violence is the answer in general. But the thing that you mentioned was that some of the South Koreans were like, yeah, I'm not so pleased about what you guys are up to. Historically, like that's not the only time that I've heard that. Like I heard that in Afghanistan, that was the primary complaint of the public, was that basically America was arming the Afghanis and to fight against Russians back in before the 9/11 related invasion, if you want to call it that. And so it makes sense, and that's a tough situation to be in, as far as like, well, it's like clearly, the powers that be want that sort of assistance, whereas the average Joe might be like, this is just going to escalate things. And it's one of those situations like what are the costs of being wrong? They're just enormous. But as far as becoming the NCO in charge, that sort of thing, let's use the normal figure it out dream job series. How does somebody end up where you were as far as authority? Like you're a fairly young guy, and so like that might be surprising to some people. But how do people get in that sort of situation if that's really their calling?
Join the military, volunteer, but I think it takes more than that. You got to know your job. I was very good at my job as an operator. Very. I would actually, I can even say this now. I feel I was like the number one operator in the military at the moment, in the time. There was no job that I couldn't do or handle. And I wasn't afraid to say that. I even said it to certain people that were higher ranking officials than me. It's just because I knew what I was good at. I was very confident and I wasn't afraid as showing my skills. Uh, and as being a number one operator, people would try and test you,
Right.
and we would do, those limits would be tested, and I always would say, in a way, I somehow always came up on top. But it starts with the mindset. That's another big key factor. I never doubted my skills, and I was voluntold to do a lot of things. So instead of complaining about the negativity in something, I just rolled with it, and I just can continue to grow. But as far as getting there, first thing is first, you gotta get rank. So you gotta do everything to get possible in that position. Once you get into that position, don't be afraid to take on uh, the key roles to becoming a leader. And another thing is, we have a saying in the military: "When in charge, be in charge." So if I was lower ranking and I was put in charge, it's time to be in charge.
Hmm.
I'm held responsible. That's another thing that hurt, that kept me going. Um, since I was responsible for all those people and all those souls, I just felt like I had to do my job.
Hmm. Hmm. Yep, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. So, of course, one of the biggest things that like it's fine to sit in your ivory tower as an academic or armchair critic or whatever you want,
Yep.
but when it comes to war, it all comes down to loss. Like I understand that living in a war zone is truly hell on earth. The rules stop applying to just about everybody, and the people who are the crappiest people seem to uh, thrive in those sorts of situations. But you're not a person who's lived a life without loss. And that's the second reason why I wanted to have you on, because the thing that you powered through, like me as a father, I mentioned before, like what happened to you is 100%. It was the top of my list as far as greatest fears, and they were realized. And you got your hat on today as usual. It says Ezekiel. So as far as do you want to walk me through? I guess a good place to start would be dropping Ezekiel off at a babysitter's.
Yeah, actually, it was a normal day. I felt sick that day. And my wife dropped off our son to the babysitters. And the babysitter didn't live very far. That's what was crazy. It was like two streets over. And yeah, you get, I don't know how to explain this, but it's the worst fear, and you don't wish it on upon any enemy of yours. It's an unnatural law of order, um, and it's devastating.
Mhm.
Um, and to the emotions in that moment puts you in no belief. That's the best way. You don't believe nothing.
Mhm.
You don't believe. You don't trust nothing. You don't believe nothing, and you're truly. I'm married. At the time, I'm still married to her, but I just wanted to be lost.
Mhm.
Um, I think at the moment when the news and the ambulance guy came out, I think I dropped to my knees. I don't even realize anybody around me. Um, and I couldn't explain it because my wife was on the way there, and I couldn't even let her know because I didn't even know how I knew she was going to be devastated. And so yeah, that was and mind you, when I got told, I was 2 streets down the road with a code, and I was laying in bed, and I was literally uh about to. I got woken up by a family member, and I just didn't know how to react. I just knew I had to get there. But yeah, it was. I don't want to ever relive it.
Right.
And you try to, you know, what's kind of crazy is that you try to do so much to protect it from that devastation. So to our audience, it was SIDS. He passed away from SIDS. His name was Ezekiel, and yeah, it was, yeah, it's just crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, I'll say. So you end up getting some sort of phone call or something like that, and like the information was like, so was it the police? Was it the babysitter? Like who was first that you know that?
So it was a family member that was living in my house.
uh
She was my sister-in-law.
uh
She woke me up and said, "Hey, Ezekiel is in got the ambulance called on him, and something happened while he was napping."
Yeah,
That's what I was told. So I instantly ran, you know what I mean, got hopped in my truck, sped over there, and I went straight to the babysitter, and the babysitter was like, the ambulance got here, they're conducting CPR. And so I don't know if anybody knows how it works, but they won't let you go in,
yeah,
even as a parent, because they're trying to do. They don't want conflict.
yeah. You'll be hysterical.
Yeah,
It's like keeping you.
emotions are flying.
Yeah,
Um, Even for a person that had their in combat and had their emotions under control, uh, in stressful situations, that's still peaks number one. Nothing beats it. Nothing. The feeling never changes. The pain is still there. It never changes either. It's just that it's I wouldn't say easier. I would say more. I can navigate it because I have better emotional intelligence, emotional control.
mhm.
Um, and to bring his story out feeds my energy. So yeah, I would say, yeah, there's emotions flying when I got that phone call, and when I got there, it just 1000x. I can't explain it. Like I could, it's like I could hear and feel everything between me, my son, and the medics. Everyone else was. You ever saw those movies where you're watching there and they only see them two?
Mhm.
I literally only saw us three,
Yeah.
and that's all I saw. Everybody else was a blur. Apparently, there was a bunch of people,
Hmm.
and I don't even remember. So
Terrifying.
yeah.
So, and then when it comes to SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, if I recall, like I got the impression like there's a few things. So, you know, I've got a really weird background, and I've also got what's called an episodic memory, and what that means is that my brain is like it's like a TiVo. It's similar to photographic memory, except for photographic is supposed to be stills. Whereas, like when I'm recalling my memory, it's like a video, you know, like a TiVo, and I can replay it back with the sound, and so I know the intonation of how people were speaking and things like that in big events. And so that is why I it's not that I claim expertise in more fields than the average person. Like I am undeniably a polymath. Like I know how to be a professional, lots of different things, and that is because of that memory. But sometimes I pick up really poignant sayings from professionals who know better. And so one of the examples that I heard before is like schizophrenia is a psychological grab bag term. It's basically if the shrink says, okay, well, this person's habitually unhappy, somewhat unstable, all that sort of stuff, then we'll just call them schizophrenic rather than figuring out what the hell's wrong with them, really. Whereas you have other psychological terms that are more specific. And when it comes to SIDS, I got the impression that it's a little bit similar, that it's like a grab bag, term for something that just
It is.
happens. And so all that they do though is they look for like evidence of foul play, negligence, that sort of thing. And if that doesn't show up, then it's like, okay, it must have been SIDS. It's just,
Yeah.
they just decide to stop living. Now, as far as your knowledge, I don't know if you went did a deep dive into it. I imagine you did, but what can you share?
So, from what I went huge into it, emotionally and educationally. Uh, the biggest key factors. I don't know if anybody knows how death works, but when you die, there is I guess an investigation, regardless whether if it was an accident, whether if it wasn't an accident, whether I think even if you get struck by lightning,
Hmm.
they have to do an investigation, and part of that investigation is to find foul play. Is the terminology a lot of I learned in this was they don't like to leave a stone unturned. So, uh, and when they couldn't find someone or a thing to blame, I tried to do that.
Hmm.
So I dove into my own educational process. And the biggest thing is when a person or a body goes through the autopsy, that's where they do their deep dive. And whatever their analysis is, you have to take in consideration because that's what their profession is.
Hmm.
And the biggest thing that I realized with SIDS is they look for foul play, right, to make sure. And I don't know if you know what petechiae is, but petechiae is little blood vessels bursting
Hmm.
in your skin, and it's a sign of choking.
Yeah.
Also a sign of struggle. You literally don't even know, but when you sneeze, you actually can create petechiae
Hmm.
because it's a sign of force of on your skin. So he came back with the autopsy report with zero petechiae. So that was one big thing, and then everything else was healthy.
Hmm.
So I like to the rest in peace with me. That helps me heal is that he went to sleep. My wife told me this.
Yeah.
He went to sleep with a full belly of milk because that was in the autopsy report, and he passed with the minimum with the minimum of struggle and with the most minimum of pain. And that's how I would look. I do imagine it. I don't love to imagine it. That's how I do imagine it because struggling is you wouldn't want to die struggling. So
Right.
I look at it that way. But the key factor is I had no one to blame. And doing my own deep dive on understanding what SIDS is, you'd be surprised on how many families go through this that don't have answers. And it's not publicly known because it's a horror story.
Yeah.
No one should live through that. Um, and yeah, it's a horror story. It's an unnatural law of order. Your kids are supposed to bury you, and not you supposed to bury your kids. My father told me that. I still believe that to this day, and it's just an unnatural order. I think what scares me the most is the wailing screams of my wife. That's that scares me
Yeah.
because I know that pain. I hear that pain. I can reimagine at any moment and make myself cry.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that is the. But as far as SIDS, not too many people know about it.
Right.
One, not too many doctors know why it happens. That's two, because you don't even know how much times I called the autopsy doctor
Yeah. Pathologist.
and be like, is this your final report? And he signed off on it and everything, and there was nothing wrong. Um, but there's some instance, it really heightens a lot. I can tell you some statistics since I learned here. The biggest statistics that I learned was that it happens anywhere between 6 to 9 months. I mean, 1 to 9 months.
Mhm.
At its most optimum level is between 6 months and to that 9 month mark. Um, and when it happens, it does happen with while they're sleeping. It doesn't happen while they're up and then just they fall asleep. It happens while they're sleeping. Another thing I did learn too was that they normally acquire a cold prior,
Hmm.
and it's slight. You don't even notice because we went over his medical history. And one of the common thing is that yeah, they have a slight cold before they go into a SIDS. And another thing, it is a general term. I feel like, and that's why I need to express the push of why I push his name. He's on everything. I contribute everything to him. So yeah, even where I'm at today. So
Absolutely. And that was why, like, I didn't want to just bum everybody out, and I'm not saying that that's what you're up to, but the pot of gold at the end of this rainbow that I wanted to talk to Eli and get his message out for, they're two different parts, and it's the same thing, which is that, you know, no friends, no family, no cash. How do you achieve what somebody achieved? And like in this case, there's two parts as far as what you went through. One of them is, I think a lot of people would fall into deep nihilism and a violent form of it. It's like, you know, you mentioned that, you know, like there was nobody to blame. And the thing is that, like, well, if you're a religious person, then you absolutely have someone on your list to blame,
oh,
and I'm very confident that you did. I can't see how anybody, like, I don't care what you believe in, I don't care what you disbelieve. I think you'd still be blaming whatever is in charge of the universe, if there is some sort of sentient being that makes those sorts of decisions. But so one is that you didn't fall to that. The other one is that you genuinely bounced back. Okay, you are an extremely positive person. It was obvious from the first day I met, and like I'm talking to people who are ultra optimistic all the time because they're getting into their commercial real estate careers, or, you know, like through funnelfixing.com, inappropriate time for an ad. But, you know, I'm helping other entrepreneurs build their business that doesn't exist. You have to have a positive mindset to pull that off. So if somebody, let's start with the first one, which is avoiding nihilism, resorting to violence, things like that. Do you have any advice for the audience for when, like, tragedy strikes? Like were there any things that you found really helped you and kept you from doing something you'd regret later?
uh, the biggest thing is you're right. I did blame. I blamed the man. I blamed myself. I blamed the babysitter. I blamed God. I blamed whatever you name. I did put a finger to it. I even blamed the cop that didn't even let me see him. For a brief 10 hours that felt like an eternity. I felt like it was just so long but I did do all of that. But how I came about it, I think, is that my wife, my optimism, my kid at the time. I didn't have Anella, my rainbow baby, but I knew I needed to be the captain of my life. I needed to be someone that couldn't be stuck in disgruntled. And I don't think I was ever stuck into being disgruntled. And it goes back to even in the military days, when you see death, hear death, you just know that there's value to life. when you know value to life, I think it's hard for an optimistic person that is truly core in his core optimistic can stay stuck in dwelling. I think the biggest key factor, if anybody knows anything about someone who's successful, they don't dwell. Uh, if if they don't dwell on a decision, they don't dwell on matters that is important to them. So they push through resilience. They build a resilience towards negativity. I think it's easier as I grow with how much optimism I have. There's got to be some sense of realism, but that's where my wife is. My wife puts me back down to earth. But at the same time, you can't be negative in a situation like that. And I was, and like I said, I wanted to blame everybody, but you really can't. And it takes more. I don't know if anybody realizes that, but it takes more pressure to hold all that burden on your head than just to know that that person, my son, is in a better place. Look how corrupt this world is. As we just talked about it. You know, there's a guy trying to shoot a missile over the Pacific or wherever he felt like shooting it, and then just to be him, for him to be part of that, it's better to see that. You know what I mean? And if anybody knows anything about economy, there could be a big turn, imminently within the next couple of years, and he doesn't have to submit to that.
Mhm.
But I take all of that in and I push it forward, man. The best thing I can tell anybody is to stay positive, even in a time of negative. My wife was the one who said that I was strong and courageous and smart, which she rarely tells me I'm smart, because she's the one that has the degree. But in that moment, I realized that I got to do something better and to build and flip the script. That's what a lot of people do. If you ask me what I did, I flipped the script. I took something negative, turned it into positive, and once I turned it into a positive, I've been growing exponentially.
Mhm.
You know, other people know, but I don't wish anybody to go through that to get success, because success wouldn't equal. But I had to do something, and that was one of those things. Is to push through and become an entrepreneur and build things in his name. I built a lot in his name.
Yeah, yeah, it really is amazing. And one thing that I'm kind of reading between the lines on, which matches like the different tragedies that I've lived through. One of the things that I've found is compartmentalizing is very important. I know that at least back in the 70s with psychiatrists and psychologists and whatnot, they would recommend against ignoring things or compartmentalization. But the other thing, since we already got into a bit of theism there, me personally, I want to use a saying, but I want to emphasize first. I don't believe there's any entity that would match the description of the devil. Okay, I don't believe that there is anything out there. I think that when shitty things happen, like what happened to you and your son, I think that is a factor of us just being biological creatures. There's a biological part to us, and then sometimes like the things just stop working, just like the car or something like that. But the reason why I mentioned the devil, yeah, well, like there's also people say it's like, oh, well, sometimes people do things that aren't characteristic of themselves. They'll just suddenly do something that could be described as evil, even though they've never had any pattern of that in the past. They don't tend to think in those particular ways. I think a lot of those types of what would be called evil are also because of the biological part of who we are. Sometimes they're like neurological misfires, And then, if you don't have the wherewithal to, pump the brakes a bit, then you do something that's positively awful. I know that most people, when they do something evil, it's more out of sloth and laziness than anything else. It's too much work to do the right thing for a lot of people, and that really sucks. But the saying I wanted to get out there is saying that idle hands are the devil's workshop. I think there's so much truth to that, of like, if you have nothing to do, nothing good is going to come of it. You're going to come up with all sorts of bad ideas, and you're going to follow through with some of them. And so the thing that I'm seeing in your report as well is another thing that you'd absolutely need to at least not have that like resorting to violence, the nihilism, all that sort of thing, is you got to stay busy. Like, that's your, like, do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, that I have a that's a huge thing. During that horrible time, I was actually selling properties and getting into one, and I really didn't want to. I really was really about to give up everything on the entrepreneur side and just let life pass by, because I felt like it was the end of the world. But I I think now, as I think about it, I'm glad in a way that I got pulled out of there, because now I have something positive to think about that I can contribute. I also can think about it as another way, as far as I can I can look at the end and hopefully be there, and he is there. You know what I mean? He is there as energy transfers, or whatever religion the life to afterlife, and just hopefully that he's there. And I think it goes back to being good. If you're good and righteous, and just being a good person in general, good energy comes back, and no matter what religion you are. If you have good energy, good vibes, good good flow, I think things just tend to go. People be like, "Oh, it's because they're chosen for that, whatever." No, I honestly think that you're just putting out that good vibe, and things just manifest towards you. Manifestation, and that's just what really happens. If you're positive and believe in your religion, belief starts a lot of things. If you on top of all of that, and by staying busy, I believed in myself. I believed in the God above, and I just kept moving forward. And now I'm here, trucking company, real estate, commercial real estate, networking with you. So subscribe. You know what I mean? Networking with high individual people that are just giving back to people. We know a bunch of people that are doing humanitarian projects, and I want to get there. I want to be there. I want to be part of those things, and hopefully have my son's name embedded on something. And so that, yeah, I believe in that. If I was to give advice to a person in a time of need, surround yourself. Surround yourself with loved ones, with a support system. I had an amazing support system. That was another thing a lot of people didn't realize about me, is I had my wife, but we had family members like my mother-in-law. I had, man, business partners, investors all around me, just saying how powerful I was, how strong I was, and they just kept feeding me with more. And in the same way, I felt like my son, I was feeding him and feeding his name and growing his name. And so it just continued. I think that's a big thing if anybody's in a time of need, is a support system beyond anything else.
Right. And there's no way your son would want you to, grovel
No.
and, like, fall apart. And I guess that's all that's left for all of us, is just to figure it out.
Yeah.
But as far as business goes, I want to make sure that people have a way to get in touch with you, so that if you seem like somebody that they want to do business with, either in the trucking industry, or through syndications of commercial properties, anything like that, how should people reach out, Eli?
They can LinkedIn connect with me, or DM me on Facebook. I'm trying to pull away from Facebook. But I have a link tree. I have Blink Me on all of those social media platforms. I wanted to put out there too. If you ever are in a time of need with SIDS, and you just need somebody who actually talked to that went through it, and positive, and want a positive outcome from it, just reach out because I didn't have nothing at the time, but I surrounded myself with the right people, and I ended up growing.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
yeah. And then also, if you guys are trying to figure it out, subscribe to this channel. That's a must. Click. Also, hit that little bell, so when
Right.
every time somebody pops up, you get a notification and continue. Just
Yeah.
continue to grow with Dan, grow with me, and just keep growing.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And the nice thing is, if enough people hit the subscribe button, then YouTube will actually start paying for these videos instead of me. And I think that's a big plus. As far as what the trade-off is, it's completely free to hit the subscribe button, and it just means that videos like these might show up in your list of suggestions. But you can go ahead and ignore those. I just really appreciate the fact that you spent this time with me. Just like Eli, I really appreciate you joining me today. Make sure you give me all of those links, and I'll put it. It'll be down in the description under this video. I'll make sure that you have all the different ways to get a hold of Eli and with any of that. But that's all I got for today. So thanks again, Eli.
All right, thank
If
you.
you're a physician or an engineer or something like that, and you have to get out of whatever your W-2 is in a short amount of time, these are the people I'd talk to. Beatreats.com. It should be like on the screen or something here. And you can check that out, and I can set you up with a customized training program with the people who already do what you want to do, instead of what some of these really crappy mentorship programs out there are doing, which is giving a script written by somebody who knows how to do deals to somebody who has never done them. Anyway, let's continue. Thanks.